but he seems to always get away with this. I mean, you've been on the inside. You've been helpful in some of these cases. I mean, I think that your insider knowledge on a lot of Donald Trump's behavior and business practices is probably valuable in these instances. But what is your inclination here? Is he going to get a freaking way with this again?
No. And I believe that the district attorney's case is a whole lot stronger than what the general public believes. I do. There is so much documentary evidence that has been provided to the district attorney's office in this investigation. And I know this because I provided thousands of documents. And I can tell you that any one of those documents are enough within which to indict him, Don Jr., Ivanka, Jared, Eric, Weisselberg, and others at the Trump Organization for criminal activity.
So what do you think's taking them so long? It's taking them so long.
That's the $1 million question, Tara. And I have to be honest with you, like yourself, every day I sit and I wait and I wake up and I turn on the news,
right,
hoping to see what I saw today with Tish James, Donald Trump subpoenaed to be deposed, right? I'm waiting to see Donald Trump's fat ass indicted, right? And having him with that fucking sourpuss, right? The one that looks like he sucked on a lemon and someone farted in his face, standing before a judge, turning around and saying, "What's going on? Right? Yeah. I'm innocent. Right. It's all political. Everything is political."
It's a witch hunt. It's a witch hunt. 2020. That was the real insurrection. I mean, he's been a bit more manic lately, if you have been paying attention, and I'm sure you have. Some of the things that he's been coming out more and more, going to these fundraisers and speaking at Mar-a-Lago, and he sounds like the drunk uncle. You would never convince me that he wasn't a drunk, the way that he goes off on these tangents and can't put a sentence together, but we all know he doesn't drink. But he sounds like the drunk uncle at a wedding, where he's like, crashes these people's weddings, and then he's supposed to be giving like a toast to the bride and groom, and he goes off on these rants about like what happened in the old days and how persecuted he was with the election. And he was on Hugh Hewitt's radio show this week too, going off on Mitch McConnell, and he's just all over the place. It just seems like he's a bit more manic than usual.
What happens is everything is now coming to a head. And that's the thing about time. Yeah, you could, like Alan Weisselberg, you could say, "Oh, not guilty." And they'll say, "Okay, fine, we're setting this case down for trial August or September of 2022. And in your mind, you're like, that's a fucking long time away. We'll figure this out by then. Unfortunately, comes July, and you're like, oh my God, I got 30 days left before the shit's going to hit the fan. Now I really have to figure this all out. And, I, on the other hand, of course, was given 48 hours. And I got to tell you, those 48 hours were the longest 48 hours I remember in my life, until they put me into solitary confinement for 51 days. And that was the longest 51 days of my entire life, right? But that's what's happening now. He's starting to see the writing on the wall. All the cases that are pending against him are beginning to come to fruition. And that's the thing, again, like I was saying about time. It ultimately comes to be your day. And I don't believe that Teflon Don is going to get away with it. I know the information that the district attorney has. I know the information that Tish James has. First of all, with Tish James' civil case, when they find him guilty, and they will, it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, which is why, of course, the great American grift is going on. He has access now to like 150, 160 million, of which I believe 90% of it he can use at total discretion. So to all of these idiots out there that are taking their hard-earned money and giving it to a billionaire in order for him to pay off certain taxable consequences, right? That's what you're doing. And what do you get for it? Nothing.
Right. Un gazzangulo, as we would say in Italian. That we have a difference of opinion about whether Trump will run again in 2024. You've said that you don't think he's going to run. We think he is going to run because one of the reasons behind, besides the fact that he can't stand being irrelevant, but the other reason is because he wants to shield himself again from all of these things that are coming home to roost. And if he runs again, and God forbid if he won, then he could go back and try to kind of push this down the road and push Father Time down the road, and chicken's coming home to roost. But so do you still think that there's no chance that he runs, minus a physical ailment?
Well, let's not forget that I beat Nigel Farage for $10,000 in a bet, which, by the way, I donated all of it.
Did you? I was unfamiliar with that.
I did. I bet Nigel Farage $10,000. I then gave the money away to 3 different charities, and I won because I actually understand the guy. He can't afford to run. And you say, well, how's that possible? He can't afford not to. No, he can't afford to run. And the reason is because that's when the great American grift comes to an end. He's going to use that they stole the election from us in 2020, as he does when he goes and he makes a wedding speech at Mar-a-Lago or wherever the hell anybody will sit and listen to him, right? So he'll walk down the street. He'll see some cab driver. He'll stop him. They stole the election from us. The guy says, I fucking hate you. I'm a Democrat. He'll go, they still stole it from me. And thanks for voting. Right? I mean, the guy is he's lost it.
He's almost there now.
If he loses a second time, it can't be like the boy who cried wolf. He can't turn around and say, they did it to me again. Right? It doesn't work that way. The great American grift is over, and it's the only way he's going to make money for the rest of his life.
So you think that it's the risk of losing that finally people will wake up and say, that's it. We that's the end of that. We're done following this guy. I don't know, because
he knows he's going to lose, Tara.
Yeah. Well,
he knows he's going to lose. The numbers don't work out for him, and he knows it. They don't. You see, what Donald has is he has a percentage of the Republican base that are so intertwined with his cult, that this of Trumpism, that they will vote for him even if he's behind bars. It doesn't make a difference.
That's why I'm not sure if he loses again, that they still say, well, they'll still believe, just like the rubes that believe it now, they'll still believe that it was a big grand conspiracy and it was the deep state or whatever other bullshit that they believe, and still continue to support him. I don't know.
But it doesn't matter, Tara. It doesn't matter, because there are more Democrats in the country than there are Republicans. So that's just true. Do it by the math alone. And what Donald is going to find out is that so many of these people that are kissing his ass right now because they're fundraising off of him, they don't particularly care for him. And they're not going to. The other day I was at Fresco, with my wife and another couple. And who happened to be in the restaurant at the same time? Christie. Oh. And it was funny. As I was leaving, we saw each other. I have to be honest with you. He came over. He gave me a big hug, turned around and said, so really nice to see you. I'm sorry for what you went through. You look good. And I said to him, actually, you look good too. And I asked him, are you going to run? And he turned around and he said to me, if Donald runs, 100%. And nobody really out there knows Donald Trump the way Christie knows. And Christie can be pretty sharp with his tongue. And I believe that a Christie primary with Trump may not go the way people think. You would be very shocked. I don't think that there's enough support for Donald.
With all due respect, Michael, and I love you. We've become friends over the last couple of months. I disagree with you respectfully on a constituency for Christie. And Christie was governor of my home state. I recently interviewed him when I was guest hosting The View a couple of weeks ago, and took him to task on his book, because the Republican Party that he's trying to sell doesn't exist anymore. And I just think that this idea that Christie is this tough talking guy and he can be sharp with the tongue, except when it came to Donald Trump in public. He let Donald Trump emasculate him in some of the most embarrassing ways that would make anybody from Jersey
it won't happen.
Embarrassed. So,
it won't happen again. Rest assured. This time it won't happen.
I have very little patience for Christie anymore. I wanted to support him before, but he showed his true colors to me during the time that he was so complicit in what Donald Trump was doing, and he sat there like a lapdog for all of his tough talking Jersey stuff. You know, he was a lapdog for Trump, and he's still not coming out and fully repudiating Donald Trump. He's still holding his cards to ingratiate himself to Trump, and I don't know. I have no patience for him, but that's okay. We're allowed to disagree, my friend.
By the way, that's right. And I still love you too, because here's the
Yes.
thing. We're supposed to disagree.
That's
You know,
right.
I use this quote quite often. Ed Koch. This is a quote from Ed Koch. If you agree with me 8 out of 12 times, you should vote for me. If you agree with me 12 out of 12 times, you should see a psychiatrist.
Right.
And that's an Ed Koch quote. And it's
Yeah.
right. I'm supposed to disagree with you. We're
Right.
not supposed to agree on everything.
No.
I don't agree with myself 12 out of 12 times. Right. I mean, you know, the notion that we have to, or Republican and Democrat, we're entitled to have differences of opinion.
Yes.
It's just this fucking right wing, you know, wackadoodle group that believe that if I don't agree with you completely, it's time for the AR-15s. It's time for violence and bloodshed. And this is all the doings of Donald. It's all his bullshit and his talk and go punch this guy and meet me over at the Capitol and everything else. This is on him.
And you predicted it. You predicted
I
that this would
did.
happen. And I'm sure you're not, you know, this is one of those cases where you're like, I never wanted to be more wrong in my life, but you predicted it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not 100% certain why I decided to even bring that up. I just knew that it was important to warn the country, to warn the Republicans that were sitting there and beating the shit out of me, not asking a single question. Think about it. I show up, unlike Meadows and Bannon and the rest of these assholes, I show up off of an invitation to answer questions. Now, the questions aren't about me. They're supposed to be about Donald, the administration, what we did, etc. Not one Republican asked me a single question. They each took their 5 minutes to bash me, which was exactly what Donald Trump told them to do. Stay on message. Constantly call him a convicted liar, convicted liar. Every single one of them used the same words. And then, of course, you had Mark Meadows and Paul Gosar with the stupid liar, liar, pants on fire bullshit. These are the people who we elect in this country? Someone with a fucking sign up there with liar, liar, pants on fire? I mean, what are we, in third grade?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's gotten worse between Gosar and now you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene and bobblehead Boebert up there, and Matt Gaetz, all, you know, as Rick calls them, the three-ring circus over there. They are embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And you've had some choice words, speaking of Mark Meadows, who is back in the news now with this book. And also, you know, he's suing Nancy Pelosi now, which is insane. And suing the January 6th committee for unreasonable requests, apparently. Again, just a delay tactic, in my opinion. But you had some choice words for Mark Meadows. I think you called him a stupid asshole or a dumb.
No, I think I said to him, he's the dumbest asshole on the hill.
Right. That was recently.
Let me ask you a question, Tara.
Elaborate?
Yes, I do. Tara, let me ask you a question. Do you agree with me on this one?
Wholeheartedly, my friend.
You see? I told you, we agree with at least 8 out of the 12 things. Do I want to elaborate? What's the point to so this dumbass turns around and wants to claim executive privilege. For what purpose? What was the benefit? Right? When you declare executive privilege, that means you're not going to talk about something. In essence, you're taking the fifth. But this dumb asshole ends up putting out a book. Right. You can't go ahead and write something in a book and then turn around and claim that it's privilege. You lose the privilege when you do that.
And when you're not in office anymore, it's not up to him to decide whether it's executive privilege or not, as the former chief of staff of the former loser president. They don't get to do that. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. So that's why it feels like a delay tactic, because they're watching what's happening with Bannon and how it's taking months for the criminal contempt charge to move forward in courts there, that they want to run out the clock. And Mark Meadows isn't bright. He's one of the first people that, suggested Donald Trump to be becoming speaker if Republicans take it back over. Oh, Trump could be speaker. And then you've got Matt Gaetz out here saying that's one of the first things he'll do if Republicans take Congress back is
Matt
nominate
Gaetz,
Trump.
my God, you bring up this sour point, right? This Matt Gaetz, this pedophile. For God's sakes, I don't understand how this kid could even stand up on a stage or a platform and say anything about anything. My friend,
You and me
right?
both.
Go back to the junior high school, find your prom date, get the fuck away from us, go Venmo her some money in order to go get a dress and call it quits because you belong in prison. I mean, this kid belongs in prison.
This idea that, it's critical race theory, that's the boogeyman, with race and teaching what actually happened in history with Black Americans in this country. That's a problem now for the right. Now they're trying to ban books on the Holocaust. And this school district down in Tennessee has banned this Pulitzer Prize winning book called Mouse. That is a graphic novel about the Holocaust, told from the perspective of a Holocauster, the author's father, who's a Holocaust advisor. He told it from survivor. He told it from that perspective. And because there was a couple curse words and I think a naked description of a mouse, who are the people, they said, no, that's too much. You have got to be kidding me.
Well, it's actually worse than that. One of the complaints by one of the school board members was that the material was too dark. Like, okay,
the cheerful side of the Holocaust.
Geez, yeah, let's try to and it more than just on its face the absurdity of it and the danger of that kind of message, because as you were saying earlier, so much of this is absurd, but we can't laugh it off because it's also incredibly dangerous, is the fact that we continue to cede ground to people who were utterly unqualified to hold the positions they hold. Instead of listening to experts, we are just putting the wrong people, the most ignorant people, in control.
It is unfortunately a feature, not a bug, of the entire movement that your uncle helped to elevate. Of a disrespect, a disregard, and dislike for expert opinion, for people who know things and can do things, and that contempt is backed up by this major news network and this whole media infrastructure, and it just ramps and ramps and ramps. It gets worse and worse over time. Yeah,
it does, and I think we're seeing that this is the result not just of the last 5 years, but of the last 4 decades or so. And it's one of the things I write about, is that one of the things that got us here is our failure to hold powerful people accountable, and our failure to reckon with our past. And here we are now in not Georgia, but Virginia and Florida and Texas, being told that protecting the feelings of white children is more important than teaching all of our children where we came from, because somehow teaching history as it happened is to suggest that white children are racist, which is just the most cynical take on all of this. And we need to figure out a way to get as many people to the polls in November as possible, because all we can do is run these people out.
It is certainly, I think it's certainly the aspect of wanting to bound off history that you don't like is a sign of an authoritarian movement, but it's also a sign of intellectual and moral weakness. And the louder they yell about it, and the more they make it the centerpiece of what they're doing, the more they don't have anything else to run on or propose. The more that this idea that you can scrub history to your needs. History may be written by the victors, may have held up for a long time, but we live in a different era now, and history is written much more widely, broadly, and more incisively. So I think it's certainly something that lack of accountability for those people is their safest space, and they love a safe space, is to say none of that ever happened. What?
Yeah.
What?
It's Orwellian, right? I mean, it's straight out of the pages of 1984. What they need to do is make everyone read 1984 again, because it's literally right out of the Ministry of Truth here.
Well, it's probably going to be banned any minute now. So
Right.
Yeah, that's right. But speaking of accountability, Mary, we've seen you speak a lot about the fact that Donald hasn't been held accountable for anything in his life, and all of the atrocious things that he's done from the time he was a child to now. It feels almost like all of that karma is starting to come back. Do you think that we're actually going to see some accountability now for him?
We have to. I honestly, like, that's the only answer I could give, because everything we're seeing, even if it feels that it's not exactly related, book banning versus critical race theory, the nonsense they're spouting about critical race theory, it's all of a piece. The mask, the objection to mask mandates and mask wearing in school, it is all of a piece, and it's all because they keep getting away with it. So that happens from the top down.
No doubt.
And I know you both have said this, and I know you both understand probably better than most that the Republican Party, as it currently exists, is a policy-free party. All they have is propaganda and hatred and fear, right?
That's why I quit.
So
I've written a lot. I've written a lot about that.
that's exactly. So they know that too. So all we can do is push back and hold them accountable, because I mean, first of all, and most importantly, I guess, if you can't hold people accountable for trying to overturn the results of a free and fair election, then what the hell can you hold people accountable for?
Exactly. And
it
was all on video.
It's all on video. I mean,
Indisputable.
and I think I've had conversations with lawyers about this. One of the reasons it's frustrating as a layperson is I feel like the evidence is in front of us, but as you said earlier, Rick, justice grinds slow but fine. Yet political time doesn't. So we're running out of political time, and that's what worries me.
So, Mary, I guess this is the question. I'm sure you're asked more than anything else. Where do you think his head is at right now? What do you think he's? I think he's stalking around Mar-a-Lago in his underpants all day, pissed off at the world. But
well, I think that's been true for the last 5 years. I don't think anything's different. I'm serious. He's the most aggrieved, privileged person I've ever met in my life. He's earned nothing. He has more than 99.999% of people on the planet, and yet it's never enough. That sounds familiar. Where did that
Somebody
come
wrote
from?
a book about that.
Somebody did. Maybe we should read it. But I agree with you. He's down at Mar-a-Lago. I think, okay, two things are happening. On the one hand, his inner circle, his minions, his sycophants are keeping him in his little bubble.
Sure.
So I don't know that he understands how much the walls are closing in on him. But whatever's happening in his life, he doesn't have the power he used to have. He doesn't have the attention he used to have. He doesn't have the platforms he used to have.
Right.
So he is a grumpy, angry person who is seeking to do what Donald is always seeking to do: find relevance and whatever his version of love is, which is basically being on the front page of the newspaper every day.
Right.
Would it be fair to say that he doesn't have as much money as he used to have either?
I don't think he ever had money. The only time he had a lot of money was when he was pretending my grandfather's money was his money.
my favorite line, and this is from a New York real estate investor person who said to me, and a hedge fund guy later.
Sorry, looking at the Chiron.
Yes, Sam. Shout out to Sam, who does
Grumpy Gus looking for love. There you go. I love it. But I went into this guy, big investment banking and REIT market guy, and I said, "This is in 2015." I'm like, "Listen, Trump is picking up. The party's changing. If we don't stand up and stop him, he could spend his own money and win the primary." And I said, "He's a billionaire," and I'm like, and then he looked at me. The guy leans back in his chair. He goes, "You know what, Rick? I'm a billionaire. Donald Trump is not a billionaire. Donald Trump is a clown living on credit." I never forgot that line.
Yeah.
And it was like my brain went, woo, at that moment. Because you know what? I'm a fairly sophisticated consumer of news. And I still thought, shit, the guy's got a lot of Manhattan real estate. He must have some quan.
Right.
Well, because the media have been horrific on this issue for 4 decades.
Right.
Maybe 5 decades, actually. So why would if you're outside of New York City, how would you possibly know?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Seriously.
Right.
And I think that was the wake up call for me, because
The
I didn't realize that.
The irony,
Right.
Mary, though, is that the media power center is in fucking New York City.
Yeah.
Like, all these people knew that Trump, that the higher ups who make the decisions in the media knew that Trump was full of shit. They knew the money troubles. I'm from Jersey. I knew how he bankrupted, Atlantic City and
Yeah, the
himself.
whole
And
city.
and I'm like, what is happening? I remember when in 2015, Politico had a section where they had the 5 authors of the Trump books. D'Antonio, they had Tim O'Brien.
Authors of Trump books.
Yes, this was before you wrote yours. Before you wrote yours. They were like Trump biographers.
David
right?
K.
And,
Johnston,
right,
probably.
Yeah. And they all gave like their perspectives on Trump. And it was really revealing. It was before you wrote yours. It was
very
really
subtle.
revealing.
Very subtle.
I know, right?
And I like it put it in perspective. I'm like, why aren't these stories out every single day? Like, why isn't CNN and MSNBC and all of these people showing the fact that Trump is full of it and what he did to the little guy? They could have blown that narrative out of the water early on. And you know who ironically was the person that was trying to hammer that home the most? Kellyanne Conway. She was when she still worked for Ted Cruz. Back when Kellyanne and I used to be friends before I realized what a wicked witch she was. We were sitting together on a CNN panel, and she was going to town on how Trump bankrupted the little guys and how he's full of it, blah, blah, blah. And then a couple months later, she was defending him, bragging about grabbing women by the pussy. So it goes to show you,
money talks.
Money talks.
And that's the thing. In the 80s. It's the same as it is now, except a slightly different version. Now it's about clicks. Then it was about selling physical newspapers. And for reasons that continue to be beyond my comprehension, he sells newspapers. He makes people click on things. He gets viewers. So it's so cynical. And again, as you said, Tara, the fact that so many excellent journalists, Wayne Barrett, chief among them, he was the first one on the Donald Trump beat. How is it possible that none of that made a dent? And that, to me, is a condemnation of the mainstream media and, again, the Republican Party as it now exists, because the Republicans could have stopped it at any point along the way during the primary. Give me your tax returns or you can't be a candidate.
That's right.
Lord knows I made that case to Reince about a dozen different ways.
Right.
And I got the deer in the headlights look. And he bought it when Trump threatened him in 2016. Reince bought into it. Trump said, I'll run as an independent. I'll break your party. And Reince was like, no, please don't do that.
Instead, he broke the party from within.
And
which is much more effective, obviously. And by the way, he threatened to run it as an independent. He never would have run as an independent.
Of course not.
Because it would have meant he couldn't, and he wouldn't win.
Right.
There was no chance for him to win. And also, by the way, I don't care how many billions of dollars he had. He didn't have any. You're right. He never had as much money as he claimed to. But even if he did, he would never spend it because he's so freaking cheap.
And he's not spending it now, right? He's going through all of these legal problems. And we made the point the other night in the show that the RNC is paying for his legal bills, which is
very authoritarian of them.
Right.
That's right. What a grift.
The dear leader must be supported at all times.
We have a viewer question, Mary. They want to know, what's the deal with Donald Trump's health? It's been a question. No one seems to tell the truth about it. Is what's happening there, to your knowledge?
I can't speak to that with any more insight than anybody else, because I haven't seen him since 2017. But as somebody understands how the human body works, it's impossible for me to believe that he isn't incredibly unhealthy. He drinks like 7 billion Diet Cokes a day. He doesn't exercise. He eats fast food, and has been under enormous amounts of stress, and things like Alzheimer's and dementia run in my family. So,
but at least he has the love of a supportive wife
and children. His 3 oldest children are just there for him.
They just love him so much.
It's mutual. I mean, look how generous and supportive he is of Donnie, for example.
Oh, poor Donnie. No matter what
Well,
you do, he's never gonna love you.
yeah,
Oh my
it's so
God.
true.
It's so true.
Welcome to the Trump family.
Oh, you know. So Mary, as we have this conversation, it's chilling to those of us who pay attention to think of the fact that this guy could actually possibly get elected again. Um, what what do you say if you had a megaphone where everyone listened to you and only you, and you had like 2 minutes? What would you say to people about what it would look like, or how can we stop this? Like, what warning would you give to folks to say, listen, we can't let this happen again?
It's honestly the same thing that I think all three of us said some version of before the 2020 election. There is no bottom. He will only get worse. He'll never concede. He'll do anything to stay in power. And if he does get him back into power, then I worry deeply for anybody who stood against him. If you don't think he has an enemies list, you aren't paying attention. I would also say to the mainstream media, you are asking. Oh, sorry, I was about to swear. Sorry.
You hear us? Say, you let it fly.
Oh, sorry.
Pirate ship.
I guess I did. Yes. The media is asking the wrong fucking question. The question is not, will he run? It's, why should he be allowed to? It's and by framing it as, will he, you are conferring legitimacy, which is the mistake they've made time after time after time. So failing that, which I'm pretty sure they're not going to correct that mistake, people shouldn't be demoralized. They should be afraid, but in a healthy way, in a way that motivates you, right? We need to understand that the only way to combat this encroaching fascism is to vote against it. So there are more of us than there are of them, and that can only matter if we all stick together and become one issue voters. This coming election, I'm voting for democracy. In 2024, I'm voting for democracy, period.
Absolutely.